Howdy folks, and welcome back to the Nature Photography Show. In this video, we're going to talk about how to get started in nature photography, specifically the camera. So you've decided to be a nature photographer. Congratulations, you have picked an incredible hobby, one that you can do from now and forever. But you also have to understand it can be very confusing even to people that have been doing it for a while. And if you're just getting started, your eyes are probably about this big and you're like, where do I even start? How do I even know where to start? Well, we're going to start with the camera because you can't be a photographer without one. So we're going to talk about the camera. I want to take you through some of my ideas about cameras and how you can go about choosing your first one. There are so many different types of cameras. So where do you start? Well, the first thing I want to talk about is this, your cell phone. You probably already have one. You could even be watching this video on your cell phone. Believe it or not, these have really good cameras nowadays. And if you are struggling where to start and you don't want to spend thousands of dollars on a camera body that you don't understand, it's okay to start with your cell phone. Go out, take morning and evening pictures, midday pictures, whatever you want to do. Go out into nature, walk around, and it will help develop your photographic eye, and it'll get you to try nature photography. So if you think you're wanting to be a nature photographer, but you're not wanting to spend thousands and thousands of dollars right now for something you're not sure about, take your cell phone out, go outside, and have some fun. The second type I want to talk about are point and shoots. I don't have one here because I've gotten rid of all of mine over the years. Point and shoots used to be really, really big, right before the cell phones came out. Once the cell phones came out, the point and shoot started declining and there weren't that many options. There are still some out there, so you can find them. And while they aren't DSLRs or mirrorless cameras, they're not exactly cell phones either. Chances are they have a better optical zoom so you can get a little bit closer. There are some advantages over your camera to having a point and shoot. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can definitely be a nature photographer with just a point and shoot. Next up, film cameras. That's right, ancient old film cameras. Film almost disappeared with the advent of digital cameras, but it's made a resurgence here lately. I guess the nostalgia of it and the fact that these are really still kind of cool things. They're just basically light boxes, which was pretty awesome in the day. I started in film. I enjoyed my time in film, but I have no desire to go back. But if that's going to be your thing, you can pick these up on eBay or any countless places online, and you can buy your film and go to it. So film cameras are still an option. They will still take incredible photographs. DSLRs. DSLRs came after the film cameras. These were SLRs. This is a DSLR, digital single lens reflex. And what happens is the light comes in the lens in the front, it hits a mirror, goes up into a prism, and then comes out the viewfinder, and that's how you compose your image. When you take the image, the mirror flips up, exposes the sensor, and then flips back down when you're done. Back in the film days, it would flip up, expose the film, and then flip back down. You can see the SLR, DSLR. So this is aging technology. There's a new camera called a mirrorless that we're going to talk about here in just a second, but I don't want to get into that yet. I still want to talk about DSLRs. DSLRs, especially any that are 10 years old or newer, take incredible photographs. You will not be able to tell the difference between a DSLR image and a mirrorless image. You'll be able to look at the photograph and decide whether or not you like the photo. DSLRs are a great way to get started if you're on a heavy budget. If you're not sure you want to do this, but you want to give it a go, then DSLRs are a good way to start because you can pick these up relatively cheap. You can get the lenses for them relatively cheap because it is aging technology, and a lot of these companies aren't making DSLRs anymore, but that doesn't mean they don't take incredible photographs. So if you're budget minded or you just simply can't afford the newest or the fanciest, the DSLR will take incredible images. Don't overlook it. And what's really neat is the lenses, while they're specific, like this is a Nikon, this lens is an F mount. That's the mount that you take, you put the lens on, that's what mounts it to the camera. It's an F mount. It's the kind of mount that it is. It's not used for the mirrorless cameras currently, but they make really, really good adapters so you can adapt this lens to one of the modern cameras. So if you do happen to get in DSLR and you decide you want to move up to mirrorless, the good news is you don't have to sell absolutely everything to get into mirrorless if you've decided the DSLR is the way you wanted to go to begin with. You can take these old lenses, get that little adapter, put it on the newer cameras, and you can still use those lenses for quite some time until you get a chance to replace them. So DSLRs, absolutely viable and incredible image making machines. Let's talk about mirrorless cameras. Mirrorless cameras are the new kids on the block. These are the newest technology that's out and available for photography right now. And they're called mirrorless because they're defined by what they don't have. So this mirror that we talked about in the DSLR, where it flips up and then exposes the sensor, in the mirrorless cameras, just like the name would imply, you don't have that mirror anymore. It just goes straight into the sensor. So what you're looking at when you look to the viewfinder on the back here is the image itself. So it is a great way to get started in photography and help with that learning curve. Because whatever settings you dial in on the camera, it will reveal itself that way in the image instantly. You don't even have to take a picture and look. You can see it immediately once you start dialing in those settings. So it helps you learn your shutter speed, your ISO, your aperture. You can understand that really quick with a mirrorless camera. They are more expensive than the DSLRs because the DSLR is legacy and you can get some great deals on used equipment. There's even still some new ones in boxes out there that you can get good deals on, so don't think they're all used. Not yet anyway. But it is the newest generation of technology. There is a lot built in here. Most modern cameras, most modern mirrorless cameras are incredible at any kind of autofocus, whether it's eye auto detect, which means you point the camera and it will pick up a person's eye, but they'll also pick up, a lot of them anyway, will pick up birds and cats and dogs and horses and whatever else you're taking a photo of. Cars, airplanes. It's incredible what these things are capable of doing. They don't take better images, they just give you more options. So if you're looking at getting into photography and money really isn't that big of a concern, let's face it, it's a concern for a lot of us, then consider starting with mirrorless. And the reason why is because all of these other past cameras, they're going away. These DSLRs, a lot of the manufacturers don't make them anymore. They only make mirrorless. This is where they're putting all their R&D. This is where they're focusing. So mirrorless is a great option. If you're just getting started and you don't have any legacy equipment and you can afford it, mirrorless is a really, really good option. And it's the one that I would recommend if you can do it at all. And it's not because these take bad photos. That's not it. It's just because you're kind of future-proofing yourself right now, at least for some time. You know how technology is. You're future-proofing yourself by going mirrorless first. But again, it's absolutely not necessary to be top of the line. Now let's talk about what kinds of nature photography you might be interested in. We'll start with landscapes. Landscapes, it's what got me into photography in the first place, and to this day is still one of my favorite things to do. I love wildlife too, but really it's landscapes that gets me out the door to where the wildlife is in the first place. The good news is any one of these cameras, including your cell phone, is going to be great for landscape photography. Now, why is that? Well, the mountain isn't going anywhere. And let's be honest, if the mountain is moving, you're probably not going to be worried about what kind of camera you have. So this film camera that's manual focus will work great with landscape photography. DSLR, mirrorless, they all work phenomenal. So if landscapes, if that's all you want to do, then you don't have to worry about having the newest kid on the block. You don't have to worry about the mirrorless camera. You'll do just fine with a DSLR or even a film camera if you want to go that route. DSLR, mirrorless, unless you just want to be a film person, which is fine if that's what you want to do. Macro photography. Macro photography is a lot like landscape photography, unless you're taking pictures of bugs, or other small critters that move. I'm terrible at it, and I just don't have the patience, so that's not something that I worry about. I do like the idea of using macro for some landscape concepts, and that's kind of cool. I love the micro world, mushrooms, that kind of stuff. So if you like macro photography, good news is any one of these is going to work, unless you're taking pictures of moving critters. And then I would say go with a DSLR or the mirrorless camera if you can, just for the autofocus technologies that's in them. Wildlife. Wildlife's a little bit different. Now, before I get really into what I recommend, I want to talk about back in the day, people made great images with manual focus film cameras that you had to wind one at a time. So if this is the route you want to go, you can go that way. You're just going to need a lot of practice, but people did it for a very long time. You can do it too. My recommendation is the mirrorless for wildlife photography. You can take incredible images with the DSLR. The autofocus works great, and they have some that are reasonably fast on the shutter speed. So if the DSLR is the route that you've decided to go because you're kind of tangentially considering wildlife, DSLR is going to be just fine. The reason I suggest mirrorless is all of that fancy new technology is built into here. And the autofocus that I'm talking about is subject detection. That means you can take this camera and point it at something. It'll recognize it. Oh, that's a grizzly bear. And then it will track and it'll lock onto the eyeball of the grizzly, and it'll hold that, so that what you're worried about when you've got the camera in your hand is the composition of the image, and not worried about so much trying to get in focus. So I love the technology in the mirrorless and the eye autofocus and that tracking and all of those things for wildlife photography. Is it necessary? Absolutely not. DSLR will do just fine. Film will be okay. It'll be a struggle for manual focus, but it can be done. So that's the only reason I recommend the mirrorless for wildlife, is just the technology that's built in. It doesn't make better images, it just gives you more options and a little bit more technology to help you out to make better images. Let's talk about sensor size. So you're going to hear a lot of folks talk about how full frame sensors are the best. And then you're going to hear folks talk about how crop sensors are the best. And then there's the medium format people. Their sensors are the best. And then there's the micro four thirds people. And guess what? Their sensors are the best. Well, I've got news for you. They're all fantastic. So I shoot primarily with a full frame. So what does that even mean, full frame? Back in the day, in film time, you had 35 millimeter. The full frame sensor size is approximately right at, I don't know the exact numbers, don't shoot me. It's really close to the same size as a 35 millimeter film. So when they say full frame, they mean full frame in that it compares to the 35 millimeter film. So there's all kinds of pros and cons to all the sensor sizes. There's no one set that is the absolute best. You have full frame, you have crop sensor, and let me give you an idea of what the difference is. Then you have micro four thirds, it's smaller than this. And then you have the medium format that's larger than this. So generally speaking, cost goes up the bigger the sensor, not always, but it does track pretty close to that. So let's use a 100 millimeter lens. A 100 millimeter lens on a full frame camera is 100 millimeters. On a crop sensor, depending on if you're Nikon or Canon, it could be 1.4, 1.5 times. So what does that mean? Let's just do the 1.5 because that makes it easy. If you have a 100 millimeter lens on a full frame and you have a crop sensor that's 1.5, you have a 150 millimeter lens. See how that works? What does that mean? That means if you're doing wildlife photography, you can get a little bit closer with a crop sensor. And if you have a micro four thirds, you can get a lot closer with the same kind of lens that you have on a full frame. And it actually works that way when you go up to the medium format too. So a 100 on a medium format, or 100 that's on a full frame on a medium, is actually not up to 100. It's going to be less than that because the sensor is bigger. So that is basically the differences. There's all kinds of technical information and depth of field and all kinds of things that you can dig into with sensor size, but just understand that any sensor that you pick in the modern cameras is going to be a good sensor and you'll get good photographs out of it. So don't let the people that are medium format only let you think that you'll not get good images if you don't have the medium format or the full frame or even the crop. Doesn't matter. They will all produce incredible images. I hope that clears things up a little bit. Sensor size is sometimes confusing. That's okay. Now I want to talk about brands. There has been a war between Nikon and Canon for decades. Now there's Sony. So now there's a war between Nikon, Canon, and Sony. Well, there's also Fuji and also Olympus. So which one is best? Well, I'm going to make a lot of folks mad here, and I'm going to tell you that they're all incredible cameras. And if you go with any one of those cameras, you're not going to be disappointed. Personally, I have experience with Nikon. That's what I shoot. I also have experience with Sony, and I owned those for a while and went back to Nikon. So I was a Nikon, went to Sony, came back to Nikon. It's all personal preference. The Sonys were incredible cameras. I've also got some experience with Canon. A lot of my friends shoot that, so I get to see a lot of Canon work. I don't do a lot with Fuji or Olympus. So it's hard for me to recommend those only because I personally haven't used them. The images that I see and the folks that I see use them, it's incredible. So there's benefits to Fuji and Olympus, so don't think that I'm poo-pooing on those. I'm not, for all you Fuji and Olympus fans out there. It's just me personally, I only have experience with Nikon, Sony, and Canon. So that's where I would say is stay with the big three. But you know what? I don't even have to say that. Stay with any of those. If you go with any of those, you're not going to be sorry. But another way to look at it is if you've got friends that are wanting to get into nature photography with you, or maybe they already are photographers, is find out what they shoot. If they shoot Nikon, maybe you buy into the Nikon. If they shoot Canon, maybe you do Canon. If they're Olympus people, maybe you do Olympus. And the reason why is because a lot of the questions that you have, they may be able to answer right away. Or, better yet, maybe they have some equipment that you can borrow. So don't shy away from the others because I only mention Nikon, Canon, and Sony a lot. It's just the ones that I'm familiar with. So any of them are going to work just fine. I hope this video has helped you find your very first camera for nature photography. If you have any specific questions, feel free to ask those in the comments below. You can also head over to the website, naturephotography.show.com, find my contact information, and send me an email. I'll be happy to help any way that I can. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, and as always, grab your camera, get off the couch, escape, explore, and create.